Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you're watching this video lecture. After the discussion on first three units related to the international trade, which broadly covered about different theories of international trade and what are the instruments of trade policy, also different organizations involved in trade negotiations. Let us move on to Unit 4 of Chapter 4, that is exchange rate and its economic effects. So, what is an exchange rate and how they are determined in general, and what are the impacts of changes in the exchange rates on an economy is going to be broadly the subject matter of this Unit 4 of Chapter 4. So, what is an exchange rate? Name itself indicates it is a rate at which the currency of one country exchanges for the currency of another country. So if the currency of one country, for example, Indian rupee is there, how much it is going to get exchanged for $1 or £1 or one N, like that. Any other country's currency, how is it going to be exchanged with the domestic currency is what is an exchange rate. So simply speaking, first and foremost thing we have to identify here, there will be a domestic currency for any country, one currency, and there will be so many foreign currencies, and the exchange rate is that at which the currency of the one country, which is domestic currency, that gets exchanged for the currency of another country, which is naturally the foreign currency. So that's what an exchange rate simply means. And in this unit, where we are looking at the exchange rate and its economic effects, we are going to understand what are different types of exchange rate regimes. Broadly, there are two categories of exchange rate regimes. One is a fixed regime and the second one is a floating type of regime. And what can be called as changes in the exchange rates. Once again, changes can happen either depreciation or appreciation of a particular currency. And what is the difference between devaluation and depreciation? These aspects we will consider in Unit 4 of Chapter 4 related to the exchange rate mechanism and how it works, what are the impacts and what is the influence of exchange rates on an economy. We will focus on this unit. Before that, let us first of all understand certain basic aspects like how the exchange rates can be expressed. There are two broad ways of expressing an exchange rate. One is called as a direct quote and another one is called as an indirect quote. There are broadly these two ways of expressing the nominal exchange rates between two currencies. Let us, for simplicity purposes, stick to one only example because there will be so many of other foreign currencies with which we can express Indian rupee. We cannot take all of them. We no need to take all of them also for understanding purposes. For understanding purposes, let us take US dollar and Indian rupee as two currencies. Naturally, for us in India, rupee is the domestic currency, dollar is the foreign currency. So this exchange rate between these two currencies can be expressed as a direct quote also or as an indirect quote also. Usually the name, this is name for direct form of quotation called as European currency quotation. That is the general norm. Whereas indirect form is known as American currency quotation. This has nothing to do with currency. It is only the system. For example, in Europe, mostly what we use also is like liters, meters and all that. For example, in America, they use the gallons for measurement of liquids. Like that, for Europe and USA, lot of differences will be there, lot of times. Like that, expression of exchange rates also can happen using a direct quote, which is mostly the European currency quotation mechanism, and indirect quote is also known as American currency quotation. These two are only names. That has nothing to do with really Europe or America. They are only just names, just the two different methods of expression called as like that. Now, what is a direct quote? Direct quote is the number of units of a local currency that is exchangeable for 1 unit of a foreign currency? This is what we have to define. Very important question also. Direct quote means the number of units of a local currency exchangeable for 1 unit of a foreign currency. For example, foreign currency 1 unit means $1 is equal to how many rupees if we say, that is called as a direct quote. For example, if you take 66 rupees is per each dollar as an example, now it is almost more than 70, but whatever it is. As an example, if you say 66 rupees is for each dollar, that is a direct quote. For whom? For Indians. The same will become an indirect quote for Americans. That's different. But we are looking at Indian context. So for us, rupee being the domestic currency, dollar being a foreign currency, how many units of local currency will be exchanged for 1 unit of foreign currency is called as a direct quote. So simply $1 is equal to 66 rupees as an example, that will be called as a direct quote, which means what? You need 66 rupees to buy $1, or you will receive 66 rupees if you sell $1, whatever it is. But of course, buy rate and sell rate will not be same. Of course, this 66 rupees or whatever the expression we are looking at, that need not be the same for buy rate and sell rate. There will be difference. That difference is called spread, which the foreign currency dealers will have as a profit. So buy rate, sell rate will never be same. We don't need to get into the foreign exchange trade and all. That is not our objective here. But just to understand, expression wise, if 1 unit of foreign currency is equivalent to how many units of domestic currency is expressed, that is called as a direct quote or a European currency quote. Indirect quote is that it is the number of units of foreign currency that is exchangeable for 1 unit of a local currency. 1 unit of a local currency, which means 1 unit of local currency means 1 rupee is equal to how many dollars? 1 rupee is equal to how many dollars? How can we get it? Simply 1 divided by 66. Just take the reciprocal of the direct quote, you get indirect quote. Approximately, it can come to 0.0151 per rupee. So 1 divided by 66 if you do, that is what is the indirect quote, 0.0151 we can say. So approximately that is what is those many dollars we can get for 1 rupee. $0.0151 we can get for 1 rupee. So what is there here you have to understand once again is, in case of a direct quote, 1 unit of foreign currency is expressed as so many units of domestic currency. In case of indirect quote, 1 unit of domestic currency is expressed as a certain number of units of foreign currency. So that can be understood like this also. In case of a direct quote, foreign currency is the base currency. Base means what? For $1, how many rupees is there? So that is where base currency is foreign currency. Here, when you express 66 divided by 1, that means, right? So what is base, which is in the denominator, domestic currency or foreign currency? That is foreign currency. So foreign currency is the base currency in a direct quote. Same way, in indirect quote, it is 1 by 66. So what is in the base currency here? That is domestic currency. That is the base currency in an indirect quote. So simply speaking, whatever is in the denominator, that is base currency. What is expressed in the numerator, that is the other currency, which is reporting currency we can say. But here, depending upon the quote, what is base currency will change. If it is a direct quote, foreign currency will be the base currency. If it is an indirect quote, domestic currency will be the base currency. Taking the example of Indian rupee and $1 US, we can understand this direct quote, indirect quote concept, very crucial concept, and short note question definitely can be expected from that. Now another very crucial concept is cross rate. Cross rate is something which is generally applied when, let us say, two countries do not have a direct exchange rate mechanism. Let us say, only for example, let us say India and Zimbabwe do not have any kind of exchange rate mechanism or price. Indian rupee and Zimbabwean pound Zimbabwean dollar do not have any kind of trade in the international market, let us say. That means the price or exchange rate between these two cannot be determined. But India has a trade with dollars. Zimbabwe also has a trade with American dollars, let us say. Then what we can arrive at as exchange rate between Indian rupee and American dollar, exchange rate between Zimbabwean dollar and American dollar. From that, we can find out the rate of currency exchange between Indian rupee and Zimbabwean dollar also, as an example. So if we do that exercise, that is called cross rate. In general, that happens when two currencies directly are not having any trade. So there is a possibility that there are two pairs of currencies with one currency being in common between the two pairs. In our example, whatever we have taken, you can take any generic examples rather than country examples. For example, let us say there is a pair X and Y and there is another pair X and Z. What is common here? X. So the rate between Y and Z is directly not known, but we can find out the cross rate. What is that cross rate between Y and Z's currencies? That can be derived from the given rates of the two pairs X and Y and X and Z. The common rate between these two being that of X. So when X and Y are expressed, when X and Z are expressed, Y and Z also can be expressed. That expression of or computation of rate between Y and Z is called as the cross rate. Though there is no direct trade between those currencies, cross rates can be found out if there is a common currency between the two pairs. That's also another important concept. Practically also it is useful in certain cases. As far as exam questions is concerned, what are the different types of quotes, direct quote and indirect quote, crucial one, and what is a cross rate? These are the crucial concepts related to the foreign currency. Now moving on to the policy things or broader, you can say the decision type of government related things. There are different types of exchange rate regimes in different countries. And who decides that? Naturally, the government of that country determines what regime they have to follow. But first of all, what is an exchange rate regime? Exchange rate regime is a system by which a country manages its currency in respect to the foreign currencies. So what a country does to manage its currency when compared with foreign currency, whatever a country does, that is called as, that system is called as exchange rate regime. It refers to the method by which the value of the domestic currency in terms of the foreign currencies is determined. By what method? First of all, the exchange rates are determined, is going to be defined by the exchange rate regime. And broadly, there are two major types of exchange rate regimes at the extreme ends, but most of the countries will fall somewhere in between that. But at a broader level, there are two major types of exchange rate regimes. One is a floating rate regime, also called a flexible rate regime, and another one is a fixed exchange rate regime. So let us understand each of them separately. What is a floating exchange rate regime and what is a fixed exchange rate regime? But first of all, an exchange rate regime is the system by which a country manages its currency in respect to the other foreign currencies, and it is the method of determining the value of domestic currency in terms of foreign currencies. How is it going to be determined? Has to be decided by exchange rate regime, of course, which will be decided by the governments of the respective countries. And there are countries which follow floating rate regime also. There are countries which follow fixed exchange rate regime also. Let us first understand what is this floating exchange rate regime. As the name itself indicates, floating means there is nothing fixed. So simply speaking, floating exchange rate regime can also be called as market price regime, or the exchange rate is not controlled by the government or the central bank of a country. It is left to the market. Market means the international market. So floating exchange rate regime means that. In the floating exchange rate regime, naturally the equilibrium value of the exchange rate of a country's currency is market determined. Market means always what happens naturally once again? Demand and supply. Whenever there is a demand and supply of any product, how the market price is determined? Same way, demand and supply of a particular currency will determine what is the price of that currency as against another currency. So when there is a demand for and supply of one currency relative to other currencies, that demand and supply will determine the exchange rate. In other words, markets will determine exchange rate in case of floating exchange rate regime. And what are the advantages of this regime? The floating exchange rate allows a government to pursue its own independent monetary policy. It doesn't have to worry about what is happening in the market because it is left to the market. And in general, markets are supposed to be fair. In general, they are going to be exactly determining the correct price, fair price. So governments and central banks can be free with the task of deciding the exchange rates on a regular basis. So independent monetary policy they can pursue. They have time to do that. And there is no need of market intervention. Every time market intervention need not happen in the floating exchange rate regime, are not necessary to maintain the reserves also. Because whenever they are required, they can be purchased from the market. If you need a foreign currency, you just purchase from the market. No need to maintain the reserves. Of course, on another hand, the countries which are already developed and having their currency more popular than the other currencies, they don't need to maintain huge reserves of other currencies. Just for a simple example, USA need not maintain rupee reserves heavily. It will have a little bit of them, but not heavily. But India will maintain too much of US dollar reserves. Billions of dollars of reserves are maintained by India. More than $400 billion of dollar reserves are there with India. USA will not maintain that much of Indian currency, not required for them. They will let the market determine it. So market intervention and maintenance of reserves are not required. Market intervention is not required. Country can pursue its own independent monetary policy. But of course, on the other side, the negative point is because of the volatile exchange rates, since they can change, because markets are always fluctuating like this. So because of the volatile exchange rates, there will be a lot of uncertainties in relation to the international transactions. So risk will be more, uncertainties will be more, and that brings more and more volatility to the currency and investments also. That is the negative side of it. But in general, floating exchange rate has some positive points like other negative points. Positive points are it allows a government to pursue its own independent monetary policy. No need for the government or central bank to intervene into the market. No need to maintain huge reserves. These are all positive points. Negative points are because of the too much of fluctuations in the exchange rates which may be resulting from the market, that can be leading to lot of risks and uncertainties. So that could be the other side of this floating rate regime. Of course, not any country, every country will have to follow floating rate regime. It is their choice. Most of the advanced economies follow floating rate regime. Countries like USA or New Zealand, if you call them advanced, whatever, Sweden, etc. Most of the countries, Western countries and countries which are generally considered to be developed countries, they follow floating rate regime. USA is the biggest example we can say. Then coming to the fixed exchange rate regime, what does it mean? Name itself indicates fixed means fixed. The exchange rate of one currency with another currency is fixed. It is not going to change. It is not going to fluctuate according to the demand and supply in the market. So this is also sometimes referred to as a pegged exchange rate. These words are important. Fixed exchange rate also considered as sometimes called as pegged exchange rate. That is an exchange rate regime under which a country's government announces or decrees what is its currency will be worth in terms of either another country's currency or a basket of currencies or another measure of value such as gold. So if it is gold, once again it is left to market, because when the market value of the gold changes in the international market, currency also will fluctuate. That is one way. That is also a kind of pegging only. But that is pegged with gold. The value of a particular currency is pegged with gold, we can say. Or the value of a particular currency is pegged with some other currency also can be said. For example, the value of a particular currency, something like Saudi Riyal, or let us say something like UAE's dirham, or Gulf countries currencies like Omani Riyal or even Bahraini Dinar. These are all pegged to the US dollar. Means whenever the value of the US dollar changes, automatically these values also will change. But between a Saudi Riyal and US dollar, the exchange rate is fixed. It is not going to change. It is fixed. So that is called pegging. Of course, fixed does not mean even the decimal changes will not happen. Small changes will happen, but those are very negligible. So most of the countries in the Gulf, which are oil producing countries majorly, have pegged their currency with the US dollar. And earlier, Iraq also used to have pegging of its own currency with the US dollar. When Iraq, particularly Saddam Hussein, tried to peg it instead of dollar with euro, then we know what happened to Saddam Hussein. So that much important it is to keep the dollar happy. So dollar has to be always on the top of the world, and everybody ideally should follow. Then everything will be smooth. Otherwise, things will not be good. That is naturally the power that United States of America and its dollar exert on the entire world. So in foreign currencies, simply we have to just understand from a practical point of view, don't write all this in the exam. From a practical point of view, any currency will be powerful, most powerful at, let us say, at a particular point of time, where that has a political power also. Proof can be just clearly known. For example, till 1940s also, 45, before Second World War, this pound was the biggest currency. Pound was the British pound was the biggest currency. A powerful currency, we can say. Biggest, smallest we cannot say. Most powerful currency. India also used to have pegging with pound only. Indian rupee, and that time the symbol was not there, but Indian rupee and pound were pegged for long period of time because they ruled us. They were our rulers at that point of time. So those two are linked. Dollar and India never were having any link originally. Some people say that Indian rupee is equivalent to $1 in 1947. That is all nonsense. It was not equivalent to $1 in 1947. It was around 3 point something dollars, not $1 for sure. Because there is no direct currency rate fixed between rupee and dollar at all. It was about rupee and pound, which was fixed, and then pound and dollar, which was known. These two are there. So that is how. This is an example of cross rate also. If at all somebody wants to know what was the exchange rate between rupee and dollar in 1947, it was not possible. You have to take a cross rate because rupee was only linked to British pound. British pound was linked to US dollar. So we could find out the cross rate between US dollar and Indian rupee. That comes to around 3 point something in 1947. Means $1 was 3.8 some rupees then. Now it is more than 70 rupees, as we all know. But the point is, the pegging is certain things which happens with a certain currency which is generally more powerful. Those days, all the world used to peg its currency against the British pound. Now nobody does that. Later on, of post-World War, naturally when the USA has become more powerful, most of the countries started pegging their currency with the US dollar. Particularly the producing countries pegged their currencies with the US dollar. Of course, that does not mean they have some kind of pressure on them always, not necessarily, not directly, direct, indirect, political, international, different types of military, all the things will work. Only currency, because of international trade, only wars will not happen. This also contributes to some extent, wherein the relationship between some countries can be at least considered to be positive when their currencies are pegged with each other. In general, this type of pegging is common in the current scenario also. Of course, before 1947, we had no choice because we were as good as part of England then. So, Indian rupee and the British pound were fixed at that point in time. Like that, any particular country can say that my currency is pegged with some other big currency. In between us, there will not be any fluctuation. If there is any fluctuation with other currencies, there will be okay. That will be okay. But between these two, there is no fluctuation. Indian rupee and British pound, it was fixed value that time. Same way now, Saudi Riyal or UAE Dirham or Bahraini Dinar with the US dollar, that is fixed. That is what is fixed exchange rate regime or pegged regime, we can say. And this can happen not only to dollar or pound or euro, this can happen to gold also if somebody does that. But that is more fluctuating because gold is also something quite fluctuating in the general world. But yes, as a measure of value, yes, that will be fixed as gold. So one person can say, one country can say, my each 1 unit of currency, whatever that currency may be, that is equivalent to, let us say, 0.001 grams of gold. Enough, that's it. That it can declare. So 1 unit of its currency is equivalent to 0.001 grams of gold, let us say. So whatever the gold value is there in the world market, accordingly the currency of this particular country also will have its own value changed. So like that, pegging can happen with another country's currency or a basket of currencies. Even a basket of currencies also okay. Or even other measure of value such as gold, that is called as pegged exchange rate or a fixed exchange rate. And there are two types of pegging that can happen. One is soft peg and the other one is hard peg. Hard peg is different, soft peg is different. A central bank may implement a soft peg policy under which the exchange rate is generally determined by the market. Means pegging is there, but it is not a hard peg. It is not like completely fixed. Usually the exchange rates are determined by the market. But if there is a huge fluctuation in the exchange rates, then central bank will interfere and they will try to do some international money market operations so that their currency is stable. Of course, India doesn't have any particular peg against any currency, but still, naturally, our track will be with the US dollars because most acceptable currency in the world for exports and imports and international trade is US dollars. And naturally, we maintain the huge reserves of US dollars only. And if, for example, the Indian currency rupee is too much fluctuating against the US dollar, then Reserve Bank of India will not stay quiet. It will enter into the market. It will either sell the dollars or buy the dollars. Depends upon what are the situation. For example, if the rupee is depreciating, rupee depreciating means the dollar is appreciating. Dollar appreciating means dollar has more demand. Just to look at the currency as any other product, then it will be the easiest thing. You buy toothpaste, you buy any other product, normally demand supply like that, currency is also another product, that's all. So if dollar demand is more, dollar price will increase, means the dollar value will increase, then rupee will depreciate. If it is normally happening, central bank daily will not interfere. If it is happening too much, then central bank may have to sell some dollars. So what it is doing indirectly, artificially creating more supply of dollars into the market, because the demand of dollars is dominating. In order to reduce the power of dollar, it may sell some dollars. It has a lot of billions of dollars of reserves. It will sell few millions of them to somehow control the depreciation of rupee and appreciation of dollar if it requires. Again, I'm telling, it is not going to do on a daily basis when it is required. On the contrary, reverse will happen. It will buy the dollars from the market if the dollar is cheap. If the dollar is available at a lower price, it thinks that in future it can go up, it will buy the dollars from the market. So like that, a central bank might influence and intervene into the market. Influence is difficult, but at least intervene into the market, international exchange rate market, so that its currency stability is maintained. That is a kind of soft peg wherein market is there, but at the same time intervention of central bank is also there. Whereas in case of a hard peg, there is no need to intervene. Completely, it is fixed exchange rate. Why? Because already there is a fixed exchange rate between them, and that is unchanging value. What is there to interfere in that? When there is a fluctuation, you want to come and stabilize that. When there is no fluctuation, when it is a fixed rate, what is there to interfere? Nothing. So that is a hard peg. So soft peg is where generally exchange rate is determined by the market, but intervention of central bank is common. Whereas hard peg is where a fixed unchanging value is there for the exchange rate, because of which no intervention of any central bank is generally required. Then, what are the advantages of a fixed exchange rate? That will be the disadvantages of a floating exchange rate. What was floating exchange rate causing earlier? Uncertainties and risks because of too much fluctuations. Now that becomes advantage of a fixed exchange rate, that avoids the currency fluctuations and eliminates the exchange rate risks and transaction costs, enhances international trade and investment, and lowers the level of inflation. All these things are the advantages of fixed exchange rate. But disadvantage is central bank has to maintain an adequate amount of reserves, and it should be always ready to intervene in the foreign exchange market. That is the other disadvantage of fixed exchange rate, because especially when there is a soft peg, central banks have to be alert enough to see whether the fluctuations in the market are too much, and if required, it has to be ready to intervene in the foreign exchange market, which RBI also does. Though we don't have any peg particularly to any particular currency, but still the reserves part and intervention into the market part is common. So though not official, we can say we have a soft peg against US dollar. Soft peg is there, but not like officially we are rupees pegged with dollars, nothing like that. So there is no fixed peg or a hard peg, but intervention of RBI is there. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of fixed exchange rate regime. Advantage is reduction of risks and uncertainties, reduction of transaction costs, and enhancement of international trade and investment. lowering the levels of inflation. These are all the advantages. Disadvantages are central banks will be required to maintain the huge amount of reserves, and they will be more spending time on international forex markets, because anytime there is a requirement of intervention, they should be ready to do that. These are the other sides of fixed exchange rate. Within that, two types of fixed exchange rate regimes. One is a soft peg, second one is a hard peg. Some examples are there like Cuba, Hong Kong, Djibouti, etc. Whatever they are, there are countries which follow floating exchange rate also and fixed exchange rate also. According to their policy, it is the policy of the government. All that we need to know is what is the difference between them, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each type of regime is what is our subject matter. Now moving on to the another important crucial aspect of a nominal exchange rate and the real exchange rate. This difference between nominal and real always we should know, even in a domestic point of view also. Let us say nominal GDP versus real GDP. What is the difference? That is always inflation. When the inflation of two countries is not same, then the nominal exchange rate between the countries cannot give a clear picture. Nominally, one country may have a huge amount expressed in nominal terms, but that may not be actually the real value of that because of high inflation. So what we have to do is, in order to compare between the two currencies in a real sense, that we have to convert the nominal exchange rates which are prevailing in the market to real exchange rate. Nominal is always what is reality happening now, but that is not showing the actual comparative picture. Real is something that we should calculate so that we can compare the two different currencies, net of the inflation effect from those two countries. So simply the nominal exchange rate states how much of one currency can be traded for a unit of another currency. That's what we are doing, exchange rate. Yeah, that is nominal exchange rate. When we say 66 rupees per each dollar, 70 rupees per each dollar, that is nominal exchange rate. Then real exchange rate is different. The real exchange rate incorporates the changes in prices. Changes in prices is nothing but the factors of inflation. And it describes how many of a good or service in one country can be traded for one that of a good or service in a foreign country. So this shows the real purchasing power. That is why sometimes it is called as PPP, purchasing power parity. Nominal is different, PPP is different. So purchase power parity means how much worth of how many units of a particular good or service in one country can be traded for the same type of one of that good or service in foreign country. That is what is real exchange rate. Of course, for each good or service we cannot do this. That is why what we will do, we will take a inflation index. That is called domestic price index, which is nothing but the inflation index in the domestic market. Foreign price index means the inflation index in the foreign market. So how to calculate the real exchange rate is, take nominal exchange rate multiplied with the domestic price index divided by foreign price index. In other words, according to the inflation of the current country, domestic country, the real exchange rate is expressed. Simply speaking, nominal exchange rate multiplied with domestic price index divided by foreign price index gives us the real exchange rate. Inflation adjustment only is being done. Domestic price index indicates the inflation in the domestic country. Foreign price index indicates the inflation in foreign country. That's all. That is how nominal exchange rates and real exchange rates can be calculated. Fisher was one of the famous persons who identified and has improvised this concept, Fisher, and sometimes it is called Fisher's index also. This index, the domestic price index and foreign price index, are called sometimes Fisher index also. Those things will more focus on SFM in final. We don't need all of that now. At least here conceptual understanding only is enough. Nominal exchange rate is whatever the exchange rate prevailing between two countries now. Real exchange rate is something which is inflation adjusted, or we can call it a deflated nominal exchange rate. A deflated nominal is always real. That's it. Real effective exchange rate is also similar. That is a nominal effective exchange rate, a measure of the value of a currency against weighted average of several foreign currencies. It is not about one country to one country. Effective exchange rate means it is the value of a one currency against a weighted average of several foreign currencies. We can call it as a basket of currencies. Against that basket weighted average, what is the effective exchange rate of one currency? That can be called as nominal effective exchange rate. And then you deflate this nominal effective exchange rate. Then if you divide it by a price deflator or index of costs, what you get is called as real effective exchange rate. So that is the point here. So here deflator means again foreign index divided by domestic index, because we are talking about dividing the nominal rate. Dividing the nominal rate means this multiplication will become reverse. So nominal effective exchange rate divided by foreign index by domestic index. But point here is foreign index is not one index. That will be a basket of various countries. So when nominal effective exchange rate is taken as a weighted average of several foreign currencies against the value of one currency, then that nominal effective exchange rate, if it is deflated by a price deflator divided by a price deflator, then we get real effective exchange rate. Whatever it is, difference between real exchange rate and real effective exchange rate is only that in case of real exchange rate, we are looking at currencies of two countries directly. In case of real effective exchange rate, we are looking at currency of one country against multiple currencies of different countries. So weighted average of those things is taken. Deflator is also naturally has to be taken as not just one country. For all the other countries put together, the deflator also has to be taken. How those are all calculated, how do we apply them, these things all will be more applicable and required at final level. Right now, our limitation or requirement is only restricted to understanding the concept of nominal and real. Ideally, we should already know it. Nominal is nothing but whatever is now actually happening. Real is nothing but a deflated nominal. How to deflate? Depends. In case of normal real exchange rate, when we calculate, nominal exchange rate multiplied with domestic price index divided by foreign price index is the formula. Or we can say nominal exchange rate divided by foreign price index by domestic price index, which is the deflator. So either way, ultimately the result is same. That is difference between nominal and real exchange rates. And now let us understand why the foreign exchange demand will be first of all required. In other words, when you say in the markets, there is a demand for the foreign exchange and foreign currency, there is a supply of foreign currency also. What are the reasons for such kind of demand and supply? Common sense reasons only. First of all, people would want to purchase the goods and services from another country, basically imports. And people may require to transfer like something like gifts, awards, grants, donations to other countries. Further, they require foreign currency. Or to make investment income payments abroad. Income payments, if you want to, if let us say we took a loan from some outside Indian person, then we have to pay interest to that, interest on that. Or somebody has invested here in India and we have to pay, let us say dividend has to be paid to some holding company staying in some other country. That has to be paid in dollars only. If we give them rupees, what they will do? So the rupees have to be converted to dollars and then only paid. Like this, investment from abroad, whatever has come to India, the income payments what we make to them, whether it is in the form of interest, dividend or royalties, all of them will have to be paid in foreign currency. From Indian context, we can understand like that. And to purchase the financial assets, stocks, bonds abroad, if we want, we need foreign currency. To open a foreign bank account, we need a foreign currency. If you want to buy some building in outside India, real capital means real estate, which is nothing but land and buildings. If somebody wants to acquire direct ownership of real capital, they would need foreign currency. And not only that, for speculation and hedging activities related to risk taking or risk avoidance activity. Risk taking is a speculation, risk avoidance is hedging activities. So for that purpose also people need foreign exchange. So the demand for foreign exchange is always there. To purchase goods and services, of course, is the major demand. Speculation and hedging is the one which creates too much of volume in the market, forex markets. But all the other things also keep on happening. Scale may be different. Some people may buy foreign real estate, some people may buy foreign financial assets, some people may have to pay money outside India as investment income payments, or somebody might require to have a foreign bank account. For any of these reasons, foreign exchange demand is created. When we are looking at foreign exchange, India is domestic and everything else is foreign. When America is looking at foreign exchange, America is domestic, everything else will be foreign. So we have to understand the concept of foreign, not that foreign is same for all countries. No. When we are looking from Indian point of view, any country other than India is foreign. And why do we need that foreign exchange? Because of all these reasons. These are the reasons. And just now, as we discussed already, how the exchange rates are determined. Simple. Supply and demand. So demand curve, supply curve will also be same like normal any product. Demand curve is going downwards, supply curve is going upwards. So the supply of dollars and demand of dollars creating an equilibrium point. So this is the equilibrium point. That is the exchange rate, and this is the quantity, equilibrium quantity of the dollars which are being traded. So usually the supply of and demand for foreign exchange in the domestic foreign exchange market determines the external value of domestic currency. In other words, a country's exchange rate. So in Indian rupees versus dollars, how many dollars are being demanded daily? Maybe that changes in seconds also. So what is the demand for dollars? What is the supply of dollars? That will determine the exchange rate. Why this happens, we already have seen. Why this happens? Because people have different needs. Let us say, just for example, some of the Indian companies like Infosys has exported some services. It received some $100 million. What it will do with that $100 million? It will have to keep it in Indian bank account in rupees only, because it has to pay its employees and all in Indian rupees only. As an example we are taking. So this $100 million has to be converted to Indian rupees by them. What they will do then? They will sell these $100 million in the market to buy the Indian rupees. So means what? There is a supply of dollars in the market, demand for rupees in the market. This is one category. And there is another category. Let us say one of the mobile phone importers want to pay some $100 million to his supplier. Let us say he needs the dollar. So what he has to do? He has to buy the dollars. So there will be always somebody in the market who sell the dollars and who will buy the dollars. Usually who will sell the dollars? Exporters. To India, generally speaking, who will all sell the dollars? Exporters will do that. And most importantly, NRIs will do that, because NRIs earn money in dollars outside India. When they send that money to India to their relatives or their own bank accounts in India, they will sell the dollars to buy Indian rupees. So major chunk of Indian foreign currency reserves is coming from NRIs. That is unfortunate, but exports are not the ones which are contributing to our very strong foreign currency reserves. NRIs are contributing, which is good one way, because our people only are sending dollars, not we are earning dollars. They are earning dollars, they are sending dollars to India. Because of that, supply of dollars is there. And these are the things who will usually sell dollars in Indian market, because they need rupees. If NRI had earned something in dollars in America and spends in America, it has nothing to do with rupee dollars exchange value. But if an NRI sends $10,000 to India, is sending $10,000 means what? He is selling $10,000. Means buying whatever the equivalent amount of rupees is. So there is an exchange between rupee and dollar in that particular transaction. Same way, exporters, NRIs, majorly contribute to the dollar selling into India. Of course, other chapter, next chapter, what we look at, foreign direct investment also increases the supply of dollars in India, because when some foreign company wants to invest, let us say $2 billion in India, somebody will announce this plan, $2 billion we are going to invest, Amazon will tell something like that. Dollars, what they will bring here? They will bring some dollar notes or something? No, they will have to bring, ultimately that dollar should be converted to rupees only, because they are going to invest in India. Means what? They have to sell those many dollars and buy Indian rupees. Means this is all the supply side of dollar market in India. Then the demand side of dollar market will be there for many reasons, as we have already seen. Our so many students in India, means from India, are studying abroad. Their parents will send dollars abroad for their studies and expenses, medical expenses. Not only that, major thing is imports. India will depend mostly on imports for majority of the products, particularly crude oil, which we don't have. So we have to import. When you import crude oil, what you will pay for it? Saudi Arabia or UAE or somebody else will sell oil to us. What will pay them? We'll pay them Indian rupees. What they will do without Indian rupees? They will not be able to do anything with that. So they need what? Dollars. When we buy something from China, what will pay them? dollars. So we pay them in anybody, whatever imports we are doing, we have to pay the other person in dollars. That means what? The demand for dollars will be more when imports are more. Supply of dollars will be more when exports are more. Of course, whatever this is, this happens daily and changes daily, because of which foreign currency fluctuations happen on a very consistent basis and very volatile also. So the supply and demand of foreign currency in the domestic foreign exchange market is what is going to determine the exchange rate. This is a simple understanding of how exchange rates are determined. Of course, as I said, demand for dollars could be for many other reasons also, majorly for imports. Reasons are infinite. Some Indian person wants to buy some asset abroad, he needs dollars. Say somebody wants to pay or transfer something like gifts, awards, etc. to some of their relatives, that requires dollars. But majorly, dollar payments going outside will happen from imports is major, number one. Second thing is the other point we are looking at, that is what? Interest, royalty, and the fees for technical services, you can call it dividend majorly. So foreign investors, they bring FDI to us, no doubt. When they bring FDI, they bring dollars to India. When they take the dividend out of India, what they will take once again? Coca-Cola, McDonald's, whatever, whoever, KFC, Starbucks, everybody, let us say earning profits in India, they keep that profits in India only? No, they go to the head office, that is America. So they will have to convert these Indian rupees into dollars, means they have to buy dollars. Once again, they create a demand for dollars. So whatever is coming into India in the dollar form, that will create supply of dollars. Whatever is going outside India in the dollar form, that creates demand for dollars. So these payments also are heavy. Actually, one of the studies shows these payments are more than the FDI that are coming to India. So net FDI into India is not really positive, it is negative. Just for understanding purposes, not with exact statistics. Let us say if in a year, $100 million is coming into India as FDI, $120 million is going out of India as dividend to the holding foreign companies, because those are the multinational organizations. Interest for all the debt that we have taken from World Bank, etc., etc. And most importantly, royalty also. Royalty goes to many companies. Most of these foreign companies, whether it is in the field of agriculture, automobile, they take huge amount of royalties from their Indian counterparts, and that has to be paid in dollars. These are the outflows of dollars from India when we import some goods, or when we pay interest, royalty, or dividends to other countries for some reason, naturally. On the other side, when our NRIs earn more outside India, if they earn also, we don't care. If they send money to India, that creates dollar inflows. Our exporters will create dollar inflows. FDI, more and more, if it enters into India, that creates dollar imports or dollar input into India, which creates the supply side of dollar, whereas the imports and interest, royalty, dividend create demand side of dollar. Whichever is more, that will determine according to the supply more than demand. Prices will come down, dollar will come down, dollar value will come down, because dollar is the product we are looking at. If demand is more than supply for a dollar, then the dollar price will go up. And why, when we are saying Indian rupee is depreciating, means dollar is appreciating? Because our imports are increasing compared with the exports. So our dependence on imports is more than our exports and actual dollar inflows which are coming into the country. That is why Indian rupee has been steadily depreciating over a period of time. Again, that is not something bad also, that is a reality. Good or bad, we will see that later. Depreciation, appreciation is a different concept. But main point to note here is, this is a market mechanism. Nobody is determining that sitting there somewhere. No, there is no fixed rate regime for India. It is a market mechanism only, and it is determined simply like any other commodity. The price of a particular currency is determined because of supply and demand. That's it. Now, where all these things will happen? In a forex market. What is a foreign exchange market? General understanding. There is nothing special here. Technical, nothing. Generally, what is a market? That is a collection of markets and institutions that handle the exchange of foreign currencies. It is known as foreign exchange market. Is there any one place, okay, everybody go there and do some foreign exchange trade? Nothing like that. Foreign exchange market is a very open word. Every country has a foreign exchange market. The collection of all these markets is broadly called as foreign exchange market. And it is a over-the-counter market. It is not a physical place. Don't think it is a physical place, something like a supermarket. It is not. It is an electronically linked network bringing the buyers and sellers together and has a very narrow spreads. Narrow spread means the buy rate and sell rate difference is what is spread. So that is what is a very narrow spread. It does not operate in a very big spread. It operates in a very narrow spread. That is another feature of foreign exchange markets. And arbitrage is something that should not be allowed in any effective market. So on account of arbitrage, regardless of the physical location, at any given moment, all markets tend to have the same exchange rate for a given currency. If it is not the case, if let us say in London market the exchange rate is different, in New York market the exchange rate is different, in Mumbai market the exchange rate is different of couple of currencies, then what people will do? They take advantage because anyway it is electronic. People will be awake for 24/7 also, they have no issue with that. What they will do? They will take the advantage of the price fluctuations in these markets and make money by doing nothing. That is called arbitrage. Arbitrage is basically taking the advantage of price differences in different markets at the same time. That should not happen. Effectively, it should not happen. In any effective market, it will not happen. Because of arbitrage process, even though there is a fluctuation, that will become normalized. And ultimately, at any point, all markets will show an equilibrium price only. There is not going to be too much of difference between one market and another market related to the exchange rates of any two currencies. Again, in general, if there is a fluctuation or difference between them, take advantage of arbitrage. Automatically, that will balance itself. So arbitrage means what? That is a practice of making riskless profits by intelligently exploiting the price differences of an asset at different dealing places. Time same, but places different, because the price is different at two different markets. Okay, though not required for foreign exchange, let us say, just example, for a particular share price, in BSE and NSE, the share price is different. Infosys is a listed company which is there in both the markets, BSE and NSE. Will there be much of difference between the share price of Infosys and BSE, which is now being traded, and NSE, which is also now being traded? Will there be any difference? No, there will not be. Why? Because if there is difference, what any person will do without doing anything special? Simply will buy certain number of shares of Infosys in the market where the price is low, and he will sell the same number of shares in the market where the prices are high. So he is doing a riskless trading and he is encashing on the price differences of same asset at different places. In this case, different stock markets. Like that, internationally also these currency markets also have different locations. But due to the process of arbitrage, there will not be much of a difference in the exchange rates in any of the markets. They will be more or less the same. That is what is essence of exchange rate markets. And what types of transactions can happen in the exchange rate market, foreign exchange markets? Foreign exchange markets will have broadly two types of transactions. One is called spot transaction. Second one is called forward market and future market. There are two types of markets. Spot market means current transaction which are carried out in the spot market, and exchange involves immediate delivery. So I buy dollars means I have to give rupees and get dollars. Simple. Delivery is done. Where the delivery is completed, that is called a spot market. You sell something, buy something, same time. That is spot market. Forward market is different. Futures market is different. In this case, there is no immediate delivery, but there will be contracts to buy or sell currencies for a future delivery, which are carried out on a forward or a future. So the delivery is not happening now, but what is happening now? Only a contract is being entered into. So a particular person will say that I will buy or sell dollars on a particular date in future at this particular agreed rate between the buyer and seller. So if that kind of contracts are entered into, that is called as a forward exchange contract. And if these are traded in the market itself, those are called futures. Like that, there are options also. So futures and options are derivative instruments related to the foreign currency. Again, we don't need to know the minute details of them because these are all part of SFM in final. Here we just need to know the names. Spot market means immediate delivery. Forward market or future market means no immediate delivery. Actual summation of the transaction happens later. Now only contract appears. So the current transactions which are carried out in the spot market and contracts to buy and sell currencies for future delivery, which are carried out in forward and futures market, same thing. So current delivery happens in spot market. Future delivery happens in forward markets or future markets. These are the various types of transactions that can happen in a foreign exchange market. And now we already discussed extensively about what is an appreciation or depreciation of a currency. When can we say currency appreciates? When a currency appreciates when its value increases with respect to the value of another currency or a basket of other currencies. So when rupee value is appreciating means rupee value is increasing and all the other currencies values are decreasing. Always it is same, two sides of the same coin. That means what? Dollar is depreciating. On the other side, on the contrary, when a currency is depreciating, let us say rupee is depreciating means what? Dollar is appreciating. When the value of one currency falls with respect to the value of another currency or a basket of other currencies, just opposite of appreciation and depreciation. Important definition. Appreciation means the value of currency increases when compared with the value of another currency. Depreciation means the value of currency decreases when compared with the value of other currencies. These are the appreciation and depreciation. But more than this, important thing is what are the implications of currency appreciation and depreciation. What happens to an economy? Very important question. Exchange rate depreciation, one side if we look at, automatically the reverse is the other side. Depreciation, if at all it is happening, rupee depreciating, we all will cry. Oh, rupee value reducing, the dollar is strengthening, rupee is depreciating. We will all be always like thinking that, why rupee is less? And we are very upset with that because rupee is our currency. We think our currency is our pride. Rupee depreciating as if like our value is depreciating, we feel. That is all nonsense actually. Actually, in the economic terms, what happens? Let us understand. Exchange rate depreciation lowers the relative price of a country's exports. Means it will make the price of the exports less. Means it makes them competitive so that our exports can increase. So depreciation of currency is a good thing for exports and it raises the relative prices of imports. So naturally what happens because of that? Imports become costly means demand for domestic import competing products will increase. So it will increase the demand for domestic import competing goods also because now imports are costlier than the domestic import competing goods. So people will go for domestic import competing goods. Why should they go for imports? Because it is making imports costly. Currency depreciation we are looking at. And not only that, because of relative price of the country's exports being reduced, it will create a demand for exports also. In both sides, it will act like a good thing. And it leads to output expansion. Naturally, when the domestic industry is boosted, that will create jobs and that will create output expansion. And when exports are getting increased also, that will lead to output expansion, both ways. And that naturally encourages the economic activity and increases the international competitiveness because of cheaper exports of the domestic industries and increases the volume of exports because of that and improves the trade balance. These are the many effects or implications of a depreciation of currency. All good things only here so far, no bad things. As far as economic explanation of depreciation of a currency is concerned, that is good, that is not bad. It makes the exports cheaper, it makes the imports costlier, increases the demand for domestic industry, increases the demand for exports, which leads to the better economic activity and output expansion. That increases the international competitiveness also and increases the volume of exports also. At the same time improves the trade balance also. Naturally, when exports are more, imports are less, trade balance will be improved. That is what exchange rate depreciation will actually create impact upon. Then we may have a doubt, if all the good things are there, why are we worrying? Why are we crying about exchange rate depreciation? Why are we worrying about the depreciation of rupee? Because of other reasons. Because all these things are theoretical. Reality is different. Our reality is majorly we are dependent on crude oil imports. That is our biggest reality. We are dependent on so many things on imports. Our imports, even though they are costly, their demand cannot be substituted by the domestic suppliers because natural resources. What India imports, if you see, first and foremost thing what India imports, biggest import bill is petroleum products. Okay, do you have a domestic alternative for that? No, we don't have. Another biggest thing India imports is gold. Do we have a domestic alternate for that? Do we have those many gold mines which can substitute that? No. So petroleum prices keep on increasing. If our value of rupee decreases, means imports become costly. Petroleum becomes costly. Gold prices keep on increasing because our rupee is always getting weakened. So there is no alternative for this. Okay, it is the bad effect. On the other side, good effect is also there. All our companies, software companies or other telecom companies, call center companies, all these type of companies rendering services outside India, earning in dollars, which are simply we can call them as export companies. They are making good reserves. They are making good money. Their profitability is good. That is one side, good side of it. Bad side of it is because there is no domestic substitution for petrol and gold, which are natural resources on which we are completely dependent on outside India, our imports become costly. Import bill will be very expensive. And not only that, because of petroleum adding to the overall inflation into the Indian economy, that adds up to the inflation. So in our context, this all theories of great thing, Indian rupee devaluing is also good, Indian rupee depreciating is also good, cannot apply, because it has equally good effects also and bad effects are also more. For a common person, bad effects are definitely more because a common person also uses the petroleum products like petrol, diesel on a daily basis, including a farmer uses diesel for the tractors and generators for the motors. So diesel and petrol are so important for a common person in India. They are part of the biggest cost structure of any household. So inflation in India will be higher if Indian rupee gets depreciated. So that is the other side of the coin, which are practical things. The theoretical things are different. Theoretically, what economics tells is, oh, depreciation is fantastic. It makes the exports very competitive. If that is the case, why our exports in manufacturing are not really competitive? Because our competition is not just on the currency. Our competition is on the overall cost. China is there sitting on the top, which is giving cheapest possible products to the entire world. We cannot compete with them as far as that level of cost is concerned, because they have economies of scale. So competition does not happen only because of exchange rates. It is one of the factors. Other factors, efficiency, productivity, mechanization, economies of scale, those things also matter. So what happens? The real advantage of the depreciation of exchange rate, India is not completely getting, though it is getting actually in the form of particularly the service exports. To some extent, yes, that is getting the benefits. But the problem is that benefit, whatever we are getting, is nullified by the additional burden that is caused on to the India due to the imports, particularly of three things. One is petroleum, second one is gold, third one is electronic products. Most of the electronic consumer goods in India are imported. Or you may say, so a lot of things are actually here only manufactured nowadays. No, yes, that looks like they are not actually manufactured in India. They are assembled in India. Not even a single processor is manufactured or actually designed in India for all the mobile phones that we are using or the laptops and computers we are using. None of the core things are manufactured in India. Those are only imported. So much of electronic goods, major value is all imported. Assembly is what? Assembly is only just a value adding 10 to 20% of the overall price. If a laptop is to be manufactured in India, everything is imported separately. Just assembling that, putting a cover on that, maybe some plastic cover on that, like this, some activity is only done. So the value addition wise, electronic goods, some are directly imported, 100%. Some are imported also, but assembled in India. Even then, 80% of them is constituting the core things are imported only. Small things are only made and assembled here. So nuts and bolts is not going to be a big value addition. That is where our bill is there. So if these things can be changed, then only rupee will appreciate. Of course, it is a good thing or bad thing is a debatable issue. But still, the reality is that first two things we cannot do anything because we don't have natural resources. Only way is Indians should stop purchasing gold. Do we do that? Can we do that? Never, not possible. So our inclination and love and affection towards gold is world famous. So we will not stop gold consumption, means we need gold, means we need to import gold. Naturally, rupee will depreciate. Happens. Electronic components, if we want to manufacture in India, we need to improve innovation. Our engineering students should innovate something so that at least we have one processor that is manufactured. Not even one hard disk, one processor is manufactured by us. big things apart. Maybe monitors and all these things, okay. But the core manufacturing of the actual things is not happening here. Our engineers innovation our engineers should do the innovation. They are not interested in that, or they are not encouraged to do that. Our education system is also responsible for that. All these things are linked with each other. When you only want to create clerks and only some labor force for the foreign countries in the education system, where will the innovation come? Where will the research and development come? What new things we will invent, which we can export? We cannot export only just our value addition in the form of labor. We have to export the real value in the form of knowledge. Just once again, for understanding purposes, imagine some company, Oxford or somebody, or some other company, Pfizer invents a vaccine for corona virus, let us say. Majorly, the money for that entire distribution production of that vaccine will go to whom? Percentage wise, to them only. Yes, some Indian company will be there, some company, Serum Limited, some company will India will manufacture. No, I'm not telling they're not manufacturing, but what is the value addition to that? Actual value addition will be how much? Very negligible. So the real value addition comes from knowledge, not just only producing what somebody has already invented. So that is where our focus, if it goes towards that knowledge society with more innovations, more research, where we can sell our ideas to others, where we can sell our knowledge patents to the others, rather than just selling our medicines, which we are doing pharma industry. But once again, that value addition is negligible. Value addition majorly comes from innovation, which we are not doing. We have to reduce our gold love. Impossible. If I tell somebody also, they will kick me. No way. So gold we have to stop importing. Petrol we cannot stop because we need that. Petrol, diesel we cannot stop. Somehow we have to increase our exports value by more innovations and research. Then definitely rupee also becomes stronger. Just like that, it will not become stronger. And whether we want to become stronger or not is a different story. A stronger currency represents definitely some bit of stability. That is for sure. A currency if much weak, let us say all these theoretical things are there, exchange rate depreciation is a good thing, let us assume. Then Zimbabwe is the worst possible exchange rate in the world. That means it should be in a fantastic state. Na? Is it doing fantastic? No, not necessarily. So the theoretical things related to depreciation of exchange rate and its advantages may not really apply all the times practically. But still, what you have to write in exam are the theoretical things. So what is the effect of or implications of the depreciation of a currency is all good things only. Making exports cheaper, making imports costlier, encouraging economic activity, blah, blah, blah. All these things have to be written, and that improves the trade balance effectively. And what about exchange rate appreciation? Naturally, it will have opposite effects. If the question is asked on what is the impact of exchange rate appreciation, just write reverse of everything. It makes the exports costlier, it makes the imports cheaper, and it reduces the domestic production output and economic activity, and reduces the competitiveness of a country in the international market, and reduces the volume of exports, and actually it will hamper the trade balance. It will create a problem to the trade balance. All opposite things if you write, those are all results of exchange rate appreciation. So that is the difference between appreciation and depreciation and impact of that on an economy in a nutshell. Now moving on to another word, devaluation is something which is different from depreciation appreciation. So this depreciation appreciation is happening according to what? According to the market. When there is a change in the demand and supply of a foreign currency in the domestic foreign exchange market, that creates appreciation or depreciation. That happens in the market, changes in the exchange rates is what is appreciation and depreciation. That happens in the market. That is not deliberately done. But devaluation is a deliberate downward adjustment by a central bank in the value of a country's currency relative to another currency or group of currencies or standard. Another one currency or a basket of currencies or a standard means something like gold. So devaluation is not something that is happening. It is something that is made by whom? By a central bank. Or a central bank is mad or what? Why should it devaluate? Again, why it devaluates is to create such kind of positive impacts to the economy for a relatively better benefits to the economy, depreciation of currency is good. And sometimes if the depreciation is not happening automatically in the market, central bank may artificially devalue the currency. So this is the reality. This happened in India in 1966. Big devaluation happened. Till that, this dollar exchange rate was almost same. Look at this huge jump then. So that was the devaluation that was happening. That happened in 1966. Another devaluation happened here. This is another big jump that happened here. That devaluation happened in 1991. So biggest devaluations India has done against dollar are, one is 1966, other one is 1991. Why it has done, with what intention it has done? Intention is good. This is the intention. Oh, making our exports better, competitive, production increase, the market, overall economic activity to be increased, trade balance to be increased. All good things only are objectives naturally. When domestic currency depreciates or devaluates, depreciation is automatic, devaluation is intentional. Whatever the case may be, the impacts are same, at least as per theory. And with that objective only, this rupee was intentionally devalued. Rupee and dollar are not just traded now, always on the basis of market. There was an intentional devaluation earlier. So during this period, 1966, there was a devaluation. After that, there was a basket peg, and it was devalued once again in 1991. Now, almost, if you see this time, 93, 94, 95 onwards, now this period is all market fluctuations. These are all market fluctuations. They may change. According to the demand and supply of dollar, they will change, and we are not going to have any direct influence on that. We have left it to the market. Dollar rupee will be exchanged according to the market prices of dollar against rupee and vice versa. So now it is all market determined. Of course, as I said, that does not mean RBI will be always blind. It will actively watch it, and if required, it will intervene under extraordinary circumstances. But still, the point is, depreciation, appreciation are some things which happen naturally in the market due to the forces of demand and supply. Devaluation of a currency is something that happens deliberately when a government or a central bank deliberately decreases the value of its own currency. I am decreasing the value of myself. Understand that. That happens. That happened. In 66 it happened, in 91 it happened. Good or bad? Debatable. Objectives always will be good. No government will tell, I want to spoil this country, I want to ruin this economy, I want all my citizens to be crying, I want all my citizens to be hungry. Any government will tell like that? No government will tell like that. Every government will tell, I am going to make this country a golden country. I am going to Garibi Hatao. I am going to make bring Achhe Din. I am going to do this. I am going to do that. Every government will tell good things only. What are the policies they take? 66, 91, 2016, whatever the numbers and years and policies of governments may be, intention of that policy will be always projected to be positive. Whether it really resulted in positive things or not, yes, it would have resulted in some part of positive things, and it would have definitely resulted in some negative things also. It's only about post-mortem that we can do once things have happened, and then we say whether benefits are more than the costs or costs are more than the benefits. That will determine, that will judge the success or efficiency of any particular government, or for that matter, government policy as a whole. So facts are that devaluation intentionally of Indian rupee against dollar happened already in the past. Couple of times big devaluations happened. You can see from that graph also. You don't need to remember any of these statistics and data. This is only for understanding purposes. Theoretical concepts and what are the core areas of currency related terminology, those are the things which are important from examination point of view. So whatever I am showing now is only for general knowledge, understanding purposes, because of the topic, which is also very crucial in the international market. For understanding purposes, I am just giving these things. For example, in 2020, Indian rupee is the worst performer as reported by Bloomberg. So it has depreciated this much. Percentage depreciation is this much, which was India. Compared with Myanmar also, Korea also, Thai also, Indonesia also, Chinese also, Philippines also, Taiwan also. Compared with many other currencies, Indian rupee has depreciated heavily in 2020. Should we worry because of that? No, that is the point. Economists will say, no, don't worry. Let us be clear that depreciation of Indian rupee against US dollar is not indicative of a bad time for Indian economy over the past 3 years. the rupee has been overvalued by approximately 17%, and the current depreciation since January is only a move towards its natural value. Our vice chairman of Niti Aayog is telling that it could further be depreciated. Now it is only up to 10% depreciated. Maybe another 7.2% also if it is better to be depreciated, he says. So nothing wrong. This is not something which is an alarming fact according to economists. And another famous economist, Raghuram Rajan sir, says the rupee has been strengthening in real terms for some time now, while the inflation rate has been modest, but above world inflation rates. As a result, the rupee needs a modest weakening over the time. So what they are saying, they are not saying rupee should be strong, strong rupee is strong India, not like that. Strong rupee is not strong India. Weak rupee also is important for India sometimes, according to economists. Hence, I am not too concerned about the rupee hitting an all-time low. Even if it is an all-time low, it's okay. That's not a problem as per Raghuram Rajan. So these are only just examples to understand. Depreciation of a currency is not something a crime or a bad thing. It has its own positive effects according to the theories, and it practically also they may have some positive effects also. Sometimes in order to force such depreciation, governments may resort to devaluation. Right now we don't need to do that because anyway we left it to the market. As far as the government intervention is concerned, it will be only restricted to RBI's intervention if required. Whenever rupee is artificially strong, then Reserve Bank of India will make the demand for dollar more by buying the dollars. When the rupee is very weak, dollar is too strong, then the Reserve Bank of India will sell the dollars, supply of the dollars will be increased so that dollar is weakened, rupee is strengthened. So little bit of change in the dollar rupee exchange rate can be induced by RBI's policies, that is there. And just some of the other news reports, somebody from real estate industry reported that the NRIs investors are flocking to India's real estate as the rupee weakens. So when the rupee weakens, what happens to them? Earlier also some person was making $1,000, let us say as a salary or a saving of one NRI. Earlier, let us say the rupee rate was 66 rupees per dollar. Now, just for example, let us say it is 75,000 rupees per dollar. That means earlier he would have only got 66,000 rupees in India. Now he will get 75,000 rupees in India. What happened because of that? His rupees have increased without increase in any of his earnings. But his rupee earnings has increased. So what he will do with that? He can purchase better prices, better projects and investment he can do here. It's only $1,000 we are looking at. Look at $1 billion. Look at millions of dollars what they have. So then naturally they will be more interested in the investment in India when the rupee weakens. That is why, according to this particular news report, NRI investors were flocking to India, means they are flooding to India to do real estate investment. Again, news things only. Don't seriously take all of them will happen exactly. Sometimes that will not show also in reality. So continuous fall of rupee against dollar increases the NRI's interest in the Indian reality. Reality means the realty sector, that is real estate sector. So these are the one side of the coin. Other side of the coin is reported by Business Today saying that the currency risk is increasing in India and India's macroeconomic parameters are sliding at a time when the world is staring at a full-blown trade and currency war. So we are having a problem with our macroeconomic parameters sliding as reported by Business Today. And what are the problems of this weak domestic macros for rupee? One is the widening trade deficit year after year because of, once again, as I told, majorly petroleum, gold and electronic. Way big things we are importing and trade deficit is more. And rising crude prices, of course, they will push the imports higher. Electronics imports creating further trouble, that also I told already. Current account deficit has increased from 0.6% to 1.9% in just 1 year. And FII inflows to slow down higher the stock valuations of India because Indian stock market was having higher valuations. Foreign institutional investors flow has become lesser. That also reduces the dollar inflow into India. And using domestic foreign reserves for interventions shows pressure. So RBI using the foreign reserves for interventions frequently is an indication of pressure according to some other people. So these are the various other sides of the coin. Whether a depreciation of a currency is good or bad, some people say good, some people say bad. Both will be there, balancing out will happen in the market. In reality, that's it. That is about foreign currency and foreign exchange rates and their fluctuations and what is the impact of them on the market in general and economy as a whole. With that, we can conclude the Unit 4 of Chapter 4 and in the next session we can discuss about the unit 5, which is about the foreign capital movements, how they happen and what are the advantages and disadvantages of that. And by the way, with that, the entire concepts and topics related to the subject of economics for finance also can be concluded in the next session. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.